Welcome to Starwire USA. Some people believe miracles arrive with thunder, changing everything in a single moment. But sometimes, miracles appear quietly, disguised as strangers, second chances, and the courage to keep moving forward when life feels impossible. Today's story, Saving Grace, Finding Hope, is an original emotional drama inspired by the title, a journey about loss, redemption, family, and discovering that hope can bloom even after the darkest storms. Grace Thompson once believed she had the perfect life. At 32, she worked as a respected emergency room nurse in Chicago, was happily married to her college sweetheart, Daniel, and looked forward to welcoming their first child. Her days were exhausting, but every night she returned home believing that love could overcome any hardship. Then, in a single heartbreaking evening, everything changed. A devastating highway accident claimed Daniel's life just weeks before their baby's expected birth. The emotional shock sent Grace into premature labor, and despite the doctor's desperate efforts, she lost her daughter as well. Within hours, the family she had dreamed of building disappeared, leaving behind only silence and grief. Months passed, but Grace barely recognized herself. The energetic woman who had once comforted frightened patients now struggled to leave her apartment. She stopped answering phone calls, ignored her closest friends, and questioned whether life still held any purpose. The hospital eventually granted her an extended leave, hoping time would help her heal, but every day felt heavier than the last. Concerned for her well-being, Grace's older sister, Emma, encouraged her to leave the city for a while. Reluctantly, Grace accepted and traveled to the quiet mountain town of Cedar Ridge, where Emma lived with her husband and 2 young children. Surrounded by forests, lakes, and peaceful mornings, Cedar Ridge seemed like another world entirely. Grace expected only temporary escape, never imagining the town would become the place where she would slowly rediscover herself. On her first morning there, she wandered into a small community center that served as both a food bank and youth shelter. The building was modest, its walls decorated with colorful paintings made by local children, but the warmth inside felt genuine. Volunteers greeted every visitor with smiles, offering meals, clothing, and encouragement without asking for anything in return. That was where Grace met Michael Carter. Michael was a former firefighter who had retired after suffering a career-ending injury while rescuing a family from a burning apartment building. Instead of allowing tragedy to define him, he dedicated his life to helping vulnerable children and struggling families. His quiet strength and unwavering kindness immediately stood out. "You don't have to carry every burden by yourself," Michael told Grace after noticing the sadness in her eyes. She forced a polite smile. "You don't even know me." "No," he replied gently. "But I know what grief looks like." Those simple words stayed with Grace long after she left the center. For the first time in months, someone hadn't tried to fix her pain or tell her to move on. Instead, Michael simply acknowledged it, and somehow that honesty felt comforting. The next day, Grace returned to volunteer, telling herself it was only to keep busy. She helped organize donations, served meals, and read stories to children whose families were rebuilding their lives. One little girl named Sophie refused to leave Grace's side. Sophie had lost her mother to illness the previous year, yet she still carried a smile capable of brightening an entire room. Watching Sophie's resilience slowly reminded Grace that grief and hope could exist together. Healing wasn't about forgetting the people she had loved. It was about learning how to carry their memory while continuing to live. As the days turned into weeks, Grace found herself laughing again. Not because her pain had disappeared, but because she was finally allowing light back into her life. Michael became a trusted friend, Emma saw her sister's smile returning, and Cedar Ridge began to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a place where broken hearts could heal. Grace didn't realize it yet, but her greatest challenge and her greatest opportunity was still waiting just beyond the horizon. Welcome back to Starwire USA. In Part 1, Grace Thompson escaped the heartbreak of losing her husband and unborn daughter by moving to the peaceful town of Cedar Ridge. There, she met Michael Carter, a former firefighter whose compassion helped her take her first steps toward healing. But just as Grace began believing life might hold hope again, the past returned to test her strength. Every morning in Cedar Ridge began with the sound of birds singing outside Grace's bedroom window. It was a peaceful contrast to the constant sirens and traffic she had left behind in Chicago. For the first time in nearly a year, she found herself waking up without immediately feeling the crushing weight of grief. Her volunteer work at the community center became part of her daily routine. She helped prepare meals for struggling families, organized medical checkups for elderly residents, and spent hours reading books to children who looked forward to seeing her every afternoon. Among them, Sophie remained especially close to Grace. The little girl carried an old teddy bear everywhere she went. One afternoon, while drawing pictures together, Sophie quietly asked a question that caught Grace completely off guard. "Do you think my mom can still see me?" Grace stopped coloring. She looked into the child's hopeful eyes and smiled gently. "I think the people who truly love us never stop watching over us." Sophie smiled. "Then maybe your baby is watching you too." Those innocent words nearly brought Grace to tears. For months, she had avoided speaking about her daughter. Hearing someone acknowledge her loss without pity made her realize that love never truly disappears. Later that evening, Michael invited Grace to walk with him along Cedar Lake. The water reflected the golden colors of the setting sun, creating a calm that seemed almost magical. "You've changed," Michael said. Grace looked at him. "Have I?" "You smile more." She laughed softly. "I didn't even notice." Michael smiled. "That's how healing works. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens one small moment at a time." Grace looked toward the lake. "I still miss them every day."